What in the world is happening? I stared at the video playing on my phone. It was showing our home, specifically our bedroom. I have an app on my phone that streams footage from our security cameras. In the footage, I saw my husband with another woman. Were they hugging? They looked too close to just be friends. Then I heard voices. You sure she has no idea? Yeah, I've been following your plan perfectly. She's clueless, believes everything. I can imagine it. They laughed and playfully fell onto the bed. I was shocked because that woman was my own sister. I'm Nancy Hadley, 50 years old. My husband David, who's turning 55 this year, and I have been married for 20 years. We don't have kids, and it's just been the two of us. Life was comfortable until about 10 years ago when David was diagnosed with early onset dementia. Over time, his mistakes became more serious. He started forgetting important business meetings, even struggling to remember how to do his job. Work became a real challenge. In daily life, he couldn't recall where he put things, had trouble dressing himself, and his sense of direction got so bad that he would bump into things. There was even a scary incident when he left the kettle on the stove, almost causing a fire. So David and I turned to my sister Anne, who manages a care home. Following her suggestion, we had him tested at a hospital, and that's when he received the diagnosis of early onset dementia. David had to retire from his job, and now a caregiver from Anne's facility comes to our home twice a week. These days, I'm the main provider for the family, keeping busy with work every day. Nancy, how is David doing? It was the day our regular caregiver, Ms. Johnson, visited our home. You're here today, too. He's your husband, so I'm concerned. After all, we're like family. Since we started relying on Anne's facility, she would often check in before I left for work. She's been caring for David like a brother since we got married. Back when we were younger, she always wanted a big brother, and she was the most heartbroken when David was diagnosed with dementia. Despite being busy with her own work, her frequent check-ins meant a lot to us. Thanks to Anne and Ms. Johnson, I can leave David at home with peace of mind while I work. My income is crucial for our finances, and I'm grateful to both of them. However, they can't come on weekends, so I bear the caregiving responsibility alone during that time. Balancing work on weekdays and caring for David on weekends leaves me with very little time for myself. I wasn't fully aware of it, but I must have been quite exhausted. A nurse, familiar with me from the hospital, where I took David for his regular checkup, noticed my fatigue. Mrs. Hadley, taking care of your husband is undoubtedly tough. But you also need some time to rest on your own. You're right. While I know I can ask Anne and Ms. Johnson for help in a pinch, I don't want to trouble them further. By the way, a new nurse at the hospital, who used to work at a specialized dementia hospital in New York, suggested, maybe she can assist you. Look, there she is. When I looked where the nurse pointed, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Amy, my college best friend. Amy seemed surprised too, but we hugged and celebrated our reunion. Amy, who was active in the softball club in college, still looked sharp with her neat short haircut. Nancy, you haven't changed at all. Neither have you, Amy. I'm so glad to see you. Amy shared that she waited for her children to grow up, got divorced, and returned to her hometown. Just let me know when you're free for a cup of coffee, she suggested. When David, in his wheelchair, emerged from the examination room after his tests, I introduced him, saying, "Oh, this is my husband, David. It's been ages since our wedding." That's right. It's been a long time. Amy, Nancy's college friend, bent down to match eye level with David, who was seated in a wheelchair, and paused for a moment. Amy, is everything okay? Oh, sorry, David. We met once at your wedding. Is that right? I'm looking forward to taking care of you in the future. Thank you in advance. David smiled and replied. Amy seemed to look at David with a somewhat meaningful expression, perhaps noticing my puzzled look. She stood up with a smile. I've taken care of many patients like your husband, so I might be able to offer some advice. I think I can be of help, so feel free to ask. Absolutely, I'll definitely rely on you. Thanks, Amy. We said our goodbyes. Later on, I encountered Amy on several occasions, such as when I went to get David's medicine or when his health declined. Each time, Amy would look at me with concern, but I pretended not to notice and brushed it off. A few months after my reunion with Amy, David and I visited the hospital together. Just as David was called in for an examination, I heard Nancy. When I turned toward the voice, Amy looked serious. Amy, is everything okay? Your husband, David, just went in for his examination. Do you have a moment to spare? Certainly I do. Amy guided me to a counseling room. Nancy, how's it going with taking care of David? Are you worried about yourself? Thanks. I shared updates on David's recent health and mentioned how the constant caregiving without breaks was affecting my well-being. Amy attentively listened to my story. Initially, I thought she was just concerned about my health. But then she began with, "Actually, Nancy." What she said next was quite unbelievable. About a week before we reconnected, Amy started. She was out shopping in town when she saw Anne with a man she recognized. Amy knew Anne as my sister, but the man's face seemed familiar to her. When Amy approached them and Anne introduced the man as her boyfriend, it was only when we met again at the hospital that I realized it was David, your husband. It was all so perplexing. That's surprising. No wonder you had a strange look on your face back then. Amy had seen Anne and David together in town a week before our reunion. However, David seemed entirely unaware of Amy's presence. I looked different back then. I had longer hair down to my shoulders and wore glasses. I looked completely different. This might explain why he didn't recognize her, but it was still quite a revelation. There's one more thing that's been bothering me. According to Amy, David's responses at the hospital seemed strangely unnatural for someone with dementia. She mentioned that his behavior resembled someone she encountered at the hospital where she used to work, someone pretending to have dementia. The man I saw in town was walking confidently, responding clearly. He looked perfectly healthy. Could it have been a mistake? Maybe you misidentified him? I don't think so. You know David has those distinctive moles under his right eye, right? The man with Anne had them too. It's kind of a distinctive feature for a guy. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be talking about your husband that way. Amy apologized, seemingly realizing that her comment was a bit inappropriate. But it's true. David does have those moles. It's not common to find someone else with the same face and mole positioning. Could it be that David has been pretending to have dementia for 10 years and is having an affair with Anne? The story seemed unbelievable, but Amy was known for her honesty. Honestly, I don't think highly of this hospital, Amy confessed. What? The doctors here aren't great, and I've heard some bad rumors. Doesn't it strike you as odd that they have so many patients? I believe you should get a proper check to confirm if David really has dementia, Amy suggested with a serious expression. Stunned by Amy's words, I went to a big box store and purchased a home security camera. I discreetly placed it in the living room and bedroom to covertly capture what was happening while I was at work. I set it up to monitor on my smartphone and checked in during breaks. Indeed, David's actions were inconsistent with what he portrayed to me. He wasn't disoriented or confused about the placement of things. He was leading a seemingly normal life. Furthermore, when Miss Johnson, whom I had entrusted to look after David, arrived, there was no indication of her providing care. Additionally, I discovered that Anne had been frequenting my home during my absences. Their conversations were unequivocally captured on the recorded footage. You're not risking exposure by pretending to have dementia, David. No, not at all. I'm following Anne's suggestions perfectly. Pretending to be unaware of the date or the locations of things is working like a charm. Acting like I don't write or go outside. Confusing day with night. It's all part of the plan. Nancy is trusting, so I doubt she'll suspect anything. What about Miss Johnson? Is she reliable, or will she spill the secret? Oh, she's reliable. Being a single mom, she needs the money. I've increased her salary a bit, and she's been keeping things hush-hush. After sharing a laugh, they would flirt and head to the bedroom. The footage left me utterly speechless. It was hard to fathom that my own sister and husband were colluding behind my back, yet the undeniable truth was right there on the recording. Faced with this shocking revelation, I felt lost. A few days later, I found the courage to confront Miss Johnson, who had been caring for David. When I reached out to her, she agreed to meet the following Saturday. I visited her apartment and presented the footage. She appeared resigned, tears filling her eyes as she apologized. "This is the truth. I've been deceiving you all this time, and I'm truly sorry. I don't have a license, and finding another job was a struggle. I had no choice but to go along with what Anne said because she offered me such attractive terms." As seen in the footage, Anne, a single mother supporting her child alone, needed the money. However, she grappled with guilt as she realized she was aiding in deception. Her guilt led her to share her testimony with me and provide copies of receipts, daily reports, and her diary from that period. Regardless of my financial struggles, what I did was unacceptable as a human being. I am truly, deeply sorry. She continued to express remorse repeatedly. In addition to the evidence and testimony from Miss Johnson, I decided to gather more proof. After meeting with various involved parties and learning their perspectives, I consulted with my lawyer and opted to confront David and Anne at the site of their affair. On a typical weekday, feigning my usual work routine, I lingered near my house. When Anne arrived and it appeared to be the opportune moment for the two of them, I returned home, capturing the scene. Caught off guard and unable to escape, they panicked. With a cold tone, I said, "I know everything now, David. I've heard you messed up your cherished job, got sidelined, and grew to dislike your work." These were details his co-worker had shared about David's conversations with colleagues. "There's nothing left for me here. Nancy is earning well. I want to quit and live a relaxed life." Observing my composed demeanor, David hastily began to confess. "It wasn't my idea. Anne seduced me. She suggested we pretend to have dementia, be supported by you while you're at work, and meet as much as we want." Even Miss Johnson had been recruited by Anne to serve as an alibi. David's words seemed to place the blame on Anne rather than me. Upon hearing David's accusations, Anne became hysterical and erupted in anger. "What the heck? David was fully on board with the plan, and now he's trying to evade responsibility. That's cowardly. Shut up. You're the one who kept pushing me into this. I just went along with what you said." As they bickered stark naked, my heart grew colder. I couldn't tolerate the situation any longer. "That's enough, both of you. Get out." I threw their clothes, along with Anne's purse scattered on the floor, out of the living room window and then closed it. Despite their persistent banging on the window and pleas for an explanation, I ignored them, closing the curtains. When their attempts to communicate persisted, I sent a message on WhatsApp stating, "Be quiet. If you don't want the cops called, leave now." Suddenly, they fell silent. For the next few days, they continued to visit the house and send messages on WhatsApp, which became increasingly irritating. So, I sold the house and relocated to a weekly rental apartment. When David was diagnosed with dementia, I proactively changed the title of our jointly owned house to my name. Considering David's retirement and diminished ability to handle financial matters, I thought it prudent to avoid potential complications if a dementia patient had decision-making authority during an emergency. Unexpectedly, I was able to sell the house for more than anticipated and use the proceeds to quietly purchase an apartment. While I hadn't anticipated this specific situation, I must commend past Nancy for her foresight. Subsequently, I initiated a divorce from David and asserted a claim for the division of assets. Whether or not David has the means to comply is inconsequential. It is a declaration that they inflicted this upon me. I will neither forgive nor forget. After the divorce, I heard through the grapevine that David remarried and now resides in Anne's house. However, it appears that their new life together is not thriving. While this is purely speculative, I believe David and Anne might have been swept up in the excitement of their affair. Marriage brings a different set of challenges, forcing them to confront each other's realities, acknowledge differences, and at times turn a blind eye. Coping with these complexities must be challenging for a couple who tied the knot in the aftermath of an affair, especially considering both sets of parents have already passed away. The house that David and I once called home has already been sold. David is left without a place to return to, and with no other family to lean on. They must confront their challenges on their own. Frankly, I couldn't be less concerned. I would say they are facing the consequences they rightfully earned. Thanks to Miss Johnson's revelation, Anne's facility lost its license and was forced to shut down. It appears the facility wasn't generating enough profit to repay the bank loan taken when it opened, leaving Anne with a substantial amount of debt. It seems like an appropriate price for a sister who stole her sibling's husband. The dubious doctor who issued the fraudulent diagnosis also faced repercussions. Following the incident, his staff, including Amy, resigned one by one, rendering it impossible to sustain the business and resulting in the closure of his clinic. Evidently, he had been accepting requests from questionable sources, providing false medical reports as he did for David, and, in return, receiving patient referrals. This unveiled the truth behind why he had a considerable number of patients despite lacking the necessary skill and a reputable status. Discovering the truth was a shock, and I couldn't help but be appalled by the audacity of some doctors. However, I acknowledge my own responsibility in this matter. I was overly trusting, believing my sister's words and the dubious doctor's assertions without questioning them. According to Amy, I tend to be too kind and overly trusting. I've always been averse to doubting people, but lately, I've been reflecting on the need to scrutinize information more and think independently. On a brighter note, Amy seems to have secured a new position at a large general hospital in the neighboring town. Her work experience at a New York hospital garnered respect, and she has already earned the trust of her colleagues, enjoying her work. Following Amy's suggestion, Miss Johnson also found employment at the hospital cafeteria. Wow, adorable. Amy's eyes lit up at the sight of a puppy frolicking with a ball. This little guy is a male miniature dachshund I brought home about a month ago. He's become my cherished companion, offering solace to my heart and body after long days at work. Since the arrival of this pup, Amy has started visiting my apartment more frequently. He's just so cute. I can't resist coming to see him, she claims. However, in reality, her visits are driven by concern for me, though she won't admit it. While I've lost my husband, I now get to relish enjoyable moments with my best friend. I find myself thinking that a single life, enjoying the company of a female companion, doesn't sound too bad after all.